ist noch nicht so weit.
Ich bin bereit!
Hello, today we are going to talk about God of War. This is a game that came out 3-4 years ago and it's considered to be one of the best games of its time. It combines RPG elements with action combat, so it makes it of course an action RPG. All this is wrapped around in a very beautiful landscape and an interesting story. As you may know, I'm more kind of an RPG and strategy game enjoyer, so this kind of game is new to me. But I heard so many good comments about this game that I would like to try to figure out if this game is actually for me and of course if it would be for you. So before we start, I would like to ask you to subscribe to my channel and leave a comment how you feel if I'm improving on this kind of videos on YouTube, or if you have any suggestions about new games that I should try and how I can improve in general. So let's see if this game is actually for you, even though you might not be a parent, and if you would enjoy it as much as I did. This game focuses on 3 elements: its combat, story and riddles. So let's start with the story. Of course I cannot go deeply into the story element, but I will try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. This game focuses on the relationship and the development of the relationship between a father and his son. His son is, I would guess, around 10 years old and starting to get into puberty, and since his father is not a classical father figure, he has to learn how to shape the relationship between his son and his own. Being a father myself, I can relate to a lot of issues both of them have, and I think this story unfolds pretty neatly and keeps you involved. The story moves in different directions and it's basically quite entertaining. You grow quite fond of your son in this game. Fortunately, both of them are not stereotypes, so the character development is interesting, as are the other characters you meet along the way. Since I encourage you to play this game, I would stop talking now about the story, because this is one of the strong points of this game. So story-wise I would give it a 9 out of 10, and I still have the feeling that you may not have the same experience if you're not a parent or not a grown-up, since probably it would be difficult for you to relate to the issues both of them have during the story. So let's talk about the second element of the game, which is combat. The combat basically is a mix of choosing different types of attack. Later on you can choose different weapons and using them to get the best results in fighting. The enemies are not that interesting, so basically if you fight the first 5 hours you have seen pretty much all of the enemies that you will encounter. Of course there are different boss battles that make a little difference, but I wish there would have been a little bit more varieties in the design of the enemies. The combat system is not really complex, so you evade, you parry and you choose light attacks and heavy attacks. In addition, you also have special moves where you have your choice of an action that you combine with your amulet and attacks that your son is adding to the fight. So overall you have a choice of maybe 8 to 10 different elements that you can combine. So basically the combat is challenging, but it's nowhere near a level of, like, say, Dark Souls or anything like this. You can play around with different difficulties. I played on medium, and basically I had never had any issues where I thought I would not make it. The tactical choices that you may do are limited, and I've never really encountered any issues where I really had to think about a completely new strategy to solve a boss battle or a battle one or the other way. But the combat feels entertaining and the moves are fluid, and I enjoyed most of the time. Towards the end it got kind of boring because it lacked the combat development, and the combat itself and the moves, they have a solid impact and the sounds feel heavy, and basically I did enjoy it. In order to develop your combat and your equipment, you have to choose between different kind of armor sets that you can either find or craft, and you can also enhance your weapon a little bit and your armor, so it fits your playstyle. But all of this is pretty straightforward and nothing surprising, and none of the enhancements that you do will change the gameplay in a serious way. So all in all, the combat does its job and keeps you entertained, and it's not involving into work. This might be because I'm not so much into action RPGs, so I don't focus on the combat that much, but it kept me entertained and I never felt that I was too strong or too weak to take on any challenges the game had to offer. Regarding the difficulty level that I choose, it was like medium, and I didn't feel like I have too much min-maxing to do to get the best results. I was pretty much fine with the armor and the weapons that I found, and I did not see that I would have any difficulties while choosing maybe different skills or that I had to adapt too much onto a new situation. So the strategy elements are pretty. The combat, parry and dodge mechanics are pretty forgiving, and I never felt that I didn't have enough time to do them. I also never felt that I would be a button smashing overall and I have to have like inhuman reflexes to deal with the combat challenges. So from 1 to 10 I would rate the combat an 8. The world and the gameplay technique in this game is like 4 years old and runs well on an average computer nowadays. I run it with a 470 NVIDIA and I didn't have any technical issues. Also, I have not encountered any bugs or anything that really annoyed me, so this game ran pretty well. Also, world building and the landscapes are really nice and they done well in considering how old this game is. This game basically runs the idea that you have a central base or kind of a hub from where you start your different adventures and the ways that you want to go. So therefore this world doesn't feel very linear, but basically you're following the main story and you get distracted by some side quests that the world is offering. But basically the main story is pretty straightforward. Also, this game doesn't feature any heavy choices where you could end the game in a different way or move in a different direction. So here you are basically yourself and you cannot be a villain or a good guy. I have not noticed any different outcomes that I could maybe influence by acting in a different way. So it does not have the complexity of, let's say, like Baldur's Gate 3 in comparison. Main story-wise, it felt more like a novel and a fixed story that you have to follow with fixed outcomes. But it keeps you entertained with the story and the side quests that you are doing. From the technical standpoint, this game ran pretty well. As I mentioned, it's 4 years old, so I would considering it a So let's talk about the riddles and the gameplay mechanics aside from combat and stories. These are basically very simple and not so much enjoyable from my point of view. It usually comes down to looking around, most of the time actually looking up, and hitting kind of runes to open chests or open doors and using basic gameplay mechanics to solve the problems. None of these riddles were really complex and had me thinking about a lot, like old school games at times, where you would just break your head in order to find a solution to a riddle. At times you feel that the riddles are not very rewarding, since you maybe get a new spell or to get some coins, but it's nothing that is really that interesting that it would make it worth the time. Basically, you move around some big blocks to be able to jump around, and you hit certain runes or a chest with your weapons to open them. So for the complexity of the riddles, I would give it maybe a 5 out of 10. It's just not interesting enough, and sometimes it just feels like a chore to solve a riddle just to be able to use an elevator to get to a new step or to a new level. So to come to a final conclusion and the question if this game is for you or not. So this game is for you if you like a story-driven game. This game shines mainly with the story and the character development. As far as I heard, the following title, God of War Ragnarok, is even more focused on this issue. So basically, That's a very good thing, and if you enjoy story-driven games, this could be for you. It lacks the decision-making and the feeling that you could influence the outcome of the story. Therefore, I would consider it more like a novel where you follow a fixed path that you have to take. But overall, story-wise, it's pretty good. The combat and the world building, they are enjoyable, but definitely not the highlight of the game. It lacks the variety and maybe different skill trees that you would have to choose. So basically, the skill trees are very basic towards the end, and I had so much points left to invest in certain skills, but I did not really bother because I didn't feel the need for it. I had pretty much maxed out everything that I needed. Regarding the replayability and the New Game Plus, I didn't even look into the New Game Plus because for me that would have been just a way maybe to finish up some quests or some side activities that I were not really interested in. Just to give you an example, probably there's a reward if you kill 50 of Odin's crows that are flying around in a game that you have to find. But this is kind for me a grinding and just work and not so much a game. I know there are some people out there and gamers that like to enjoy these kind of side activities and accomplishments. That's perfectly fine if you enjoy this. But for me, that wasn't it. The story and the character development is basically the strong point of this game, in my opinion. So basically, if you enjoy these kind of games that are story driven, that are interesting to play, I would suggest you give it a try. Sometimes you see this game on sale where you pay like €20 for it, and that's a very good price for the amount of entertainment you get. I've played this game for about 30 hours and basically did some side quests that came along with it. Would I recommend this game? Yes, I would. And I would suggest you maybe get it on a sale if you're on the fence for it and give it a try. So thank you for taking your time and watching this video, and let me know how you feel about it in the comments and what I can do better, and always I would appreciate if you subscribe to this channel. Have a nice day. Bye bye.